everybody, and welcome back to Retirement Rescue. Today I'm working on the edits for the wood stove project. Yes, the wood stove is finally in. It was really a great experience. I learned a ton doing this little project. And so I'm going to share that with y'all. And at the end of this video, I'm going to talk about how much all this cost. So be sure and stay tuned for that. There is some of the video that got deleted, not a lot, so thankfully I still have most of it. But that's what happens when you're doing lots of segments at different times. You kind of screw that up on occasion, so my bad. But I wanted to talk to you about a few things if you're thinking about getting a wood stove. Now, as most of you know that have followed the wood stove saga, I live in a mobile home. The very first thing anyone should ever do before they even purchase a wood stove is talk to your insurance company. Depending on where you are and who your insurance company is, they may or may not even allow you to get a wood stove in a mobile home. Thankfully, mine did. However, even if they allow it, they may have specific requirements in addition to the manufacturer installation. That was certainly true in my case. They had a whole list of things we had to comply with in order to ensure that I would have insurance. Now, having said that, the insurance, even if your insurance company allows you to get a wood stove and they will insure it, sometimes the rates are extremely expensive. That is not the case in my case. My insurance agent and insurance company has said that the increase in my premiums will be $50 to $75 per year. So just a few dollars a month if I comply with all the requirements. So I absolutely want to do that. And first and foremost on those requirements is you have to get a wood stove that is compliant and able to be installed in a manufactured home. There are a lot of wood stoves out there. A lot of them you cannot install in a manufactured home. The manufacturer has to state that it is able to be installed in a manufactured home, and they have specific requirements for that if you do install it there. Again, I ordered the correct wood stove. We met all the manufacturer requirements. We met the additional underwriting requirements for insurance, but that is absolutely critical. If your insurance company is not going to insure it, do you really want to do it? In my case, it was no. This is not full-time heating. This is supplemental heating. I have central gas heat and air in my house. However, if I don't have electricity, I wanted this as backup. This is supplemental heating. It is not the primary heat source. That makes a huge difference to insurance. The fur children are just after each other this morning. Sorry about that. But that is absolutely critical to your insurance as well. So once you've checked with your insurance and you're all good and you know what those requirements are, then you absolutely start your install. Now understand, none of this I have ever done before. I had a couple of friends, Melissa and Carl, who were helping me. Carl installed the wood stove in his house. He's done it before. Melissa hadn't done a lot of this stuff too, although she has a little bit more experience than I do. And so Melissa and I handled the setting the tiles, and Carl really handled the wood stove install for the most part, especially the roof stuff. So I'm going to kind of walk you through that, and most of this will be voiceover. But we got started. Our tiles were 12 by 24 tiles. Those are large format tiles. The requirement from my insurance company was that they had to be porcelain tiles, not ceramics. And y'all, let me tell you right now, when you go to these big box stores, those guys will argue with you on the floor. This is the same. This is it. This is the thing. And the thing is, it's not the same. And it doesn't matter if it is the same. That's not what the insurance company requires. Be sure you read the boxes when you pick stuff up. Melissa and Carl went to get the tile. They were going to Colorado Springs. They were going to pick the tile up because everybody was out down here. And when they went to pick them up, they were assured they were porcelain. When they went to load them in the truck, what they brought out was not porcelain. So be very, very careful. Same thing happened when we went to get the thin set. Because here again, the guys at the big box store are trying to sell you the thin set for small tile. You can't use that for large format tile. You have to get the right stuff. So be very careful. It says on the bag what it's for. Read everything you have and be sure you get the right stuff. It's so frustrating to have to go back and forth to a big box store, especially if there's not one close. So be very careful. The first thing we did was we put up cement board on the floor and on the wall, and then we set the tile on the floor. Melissa and I did this. It was way easier than I thought it was going to be. Honestly, I thought it was going to be an unholy mess because we really hadn't done it before. Melissa set some tile before, but they were small. So, but we did it. It actually worked great. We didn't have a problem with it being level. We didn't have a problem with it being straight. We didn't have a problem setting the pattern or cutting the tile. We just used a little grinder to score the tile and then pop them because we only had 3 tiles to cut. Now the grout I chose for this particular tile, and I have little teeny, you can kind of see here, I got little bitty teeny grout lines. Okay, they're very small. Some of them are barely 1/8 of an inch. The tile is quite close together. If you're doing something that small, you have to get non-sanded grout, which is what we did. Here again, it says on the box what it's for, and they are not really interchangeable. So you want to get non-sanded grout. The grout I chose is a dark gray, so it almost matches the tile. It's slightly darker than the tile. So when you lay it all out, and you can see in this picture, when you get it all done, that tile, it almost looks like one sheet instead of individual tiles. And I kind of like that look. It's all just one sheet. But that grout was easy to do. It didn't take me any time. I did it all by myself. First time I'd ever done it. It was very easy. Now before we could set the wood stove, we had to get the galvanized metal on the back. And one of the things you're going to notice in these video clips is that we used 1-inch square metal spacers. And you may be wondering, well, why did we cut all those pieces instead of just getting long one? Well, they only had one at Tractor Supply, and they didn't even know if they could get any more. There's nowhere else around here that had any. So what we did was we just cut small pieces and we used it, and it worked perfectly. We didn't need to go buy any more. We didn't need to do any more. So Carl was able to do that, and we put those on the wall. Here is what we needed to do for this galvanized metal. And this is really true if you have any kind of heat shield. What makes a heat shield effective is airflow behind it. And in order to get that airflow, our galvanized corrugated metal had to be a minimum of 2 inches off the floor and 1 inch away from the wall. And that allows that air to flow behind that galvanized metal and keep it cool. Now there's cement board behind this galvanized metal too, but that heat shield will help. You'll notice and you can see kind of behind me, the wood stove is quite a distance from the wall. That is insurance company requirement. They required a minimum of 26 inches. That is a long ways. It's kind of out in the middle of the floor, in fact. And so that's something to be aware of, is that your clearances for a mobile home are dramatically larger and farther away than your clearances for a stick-built home. You might believe it's overkill. It does not matter. It doesn't matter what anyone thinks. And actually, we had this argument even amongst ourselves. It does not matter if you think it's overkill. It does not matter if you think it's unnecessary. Some of these requirements, honestly, were kind of extreme. It does not matter. What matters is, are you going to have insurance or not? Now, once we got the galvanized metal up, we also had to put, and you'll notice, you can see right behind my little trash can there, that's my ash trash can, by the way, you will see this, the 4-inch air intake. And I'm going to show you a little bit of footage of that too. For mobile homes, they require an outside air intake. The stoves that are made for mobile homes have air intakes. A lot of them are little bitty, like 1 inch. This one had a 4-inch air intake. And let me tell you what, This stove drafts like a boss. Let me tell you, it does wonderful things for your ability to draft, even in high wind. The day we started this and fired it up, for the very first fire, the wind was blowing. We were getting gusts of 50 miles an hour. Had no problem at all. It was incredible. So even in a stick-built home, if you have the option to put in this kind of air intake, that could really help your draft. But in this situation, here again, that's a requirement. You have to have the air intake. This was very, very easy. It's got a little dryer vent kind of thing on the outside of the house, and that air intake does wonderful things for the drafting of this stove. And then we measured to cut the hole in the ceiling, and honestly, y'all, this was the most stressful part for me. The idea of putting a hole in the top of my house, very stressful. And I have a pro panel roof. I wanted to be sure the roof did not leak. It has not rained a really big rain yet, because semi-arid conditions here in New Mexico. But as soon as it does, I'll see how it does. But I have a feeling it'll be great. And but we got the hole cut, and here's some pictures from that. We got the chimney up on the roof, which Carl did all of that. If it's more than 6 feet high, I have height issues. So there's no way I could get up there and help with that. But Carl got all the roof done, the chimney in, everything siliconed and done. Slid under my pro panel roof where it's not going to leak. He made sure of that, and it looks great, honestly. It really does, especially up toward the ceiling, the little trim pieces and everything. It looks great. Now after that, the big deal was putting the stovepipe in. Y'all, stovepipe is one of the most frustrating things. In retrospect, I wish I had gotten the expandable stovepipe where you just put it in, it goes up, it goes down. We got the kind you fit together. And that was just an exercise in frustration in many ways. You have to pop it together, and then you try to put the pieces together, and they pop out, and they're not perfect. And then you have to get it from the ceiling to the stove. It doesn't expand. It's very hard. That was so frustrating. But we got it done. We absolutely got it done. So, as frustrating as it was, it still happened, which is awesome. But that made me want to pull my hair out. Once we had everything in place, the stovepipe in, it's level, straight. At that point, we could bolt the stove to the floor. This is also a requirement for mobile homes. Even though the stove is extremely heavy, it's not going anywhere. If you're in a mobile home, they require you to bolt it to the floor. All 4 legs, not just 2, not just 1. You have to bolt all 4 legs. So we did that. They also require that you run a grounding wire, and they'll tell you the gauge wire and everything you need to use from the stove to the chassis underneath the mobile home. Again, some people may think that's overkill, but that's a lightning requirement. So we use the right wire. We grounded it from the stove to the mobile home. And so we're safe there. And here again, that is an insurance requirement. And after that, we lit our first fire. Now when you have a brand new wood stove, if you haven't had one before, it is important that you build a little series of fires. And the instructions in your book will tell you exactly how to do it. But in my case, for this stove, I had to build a series of 3 fires. This was to ensure the paint on the stove cured correctly, and this paint will give off some fumes as it's curing. So we wanted to do that on a day where we had plenty of air in the house. We could open windows, doors if we needed to. So anyway, we started the first little fire. We had to build 2 fires separately that were 20 minutes long and let the stove cool off in between. And then I got to build a big fire. When I say big fire, I mean a regular sized fire. You never want to overfire your stove. And I'll be honest, building a fire takes a little bit of knack. There are some tips and tricks to it that make it a little bit easier. I will say, because my stove drafts really well, it's easier to light my stove than it is some other stoves or fireplaces. But even with that, there's a little bit of a trick to it. And so it took me a little bit of practice to get to where I could light a fire and it stay lit and go ahead and catch my wood on fire. But so far, I have really enjoyed it. And this next week is supposed to be our first pretty good cold spell with snow and everything since I have had my stove. So I'm anxious to use it, super happy with it. Now there is still some finish and trim work that I will do. I am debating on what to put around it, what to put on the bottom, probably some sort of tile or some sort of framing so you don't see the edges of this metal. There has to be airflow, so you put a distance. But once I get it all done, including the room painted, the floor in the living room laid, I'll give you an update at that point. But the stove is in. It is functional, absolutely functional, and I am enjoying it. Now let's talk about cost. This stove itself, the stove itself, which I bought at Tractor Supply, was a $650 stove. And with tax and everything, it was just like a little dollar or two over $700. That was the cheapest part of this install. And understand, I didn't pay for labor. I had friends help me. One of the cool things about being retired or semi-retired is you know people with the right skills of the right age that can come and help you. And thankfully, I had some good friends, Carl and Melissa, who could drop everything and come help me. That saved me a ton of money. But the stove itself, $700. The cement board, tile, mortar, and everything to do with. We had to buy trowels. We had to buy all kinds of things to do this tile with. That was another $250. Yeah. Then I had to buy the corrugated metal, the spacers, everything we needed for that. That was another about $125-ish. Give or take, with tax. Then I had to buy the stovepipe, the chimney, the little box that goes through the house, and all the accessories you need to install that. A lot of that comes as a kit. So I bought the kit, which is everything you need to go through the roof. I bought the chimney, which is separate, and then I bought this stovepipe. The kit that goes through the roof with tax was $400. $400. It's a lot of little pieces and stuff. The chimney, which I bought separately, was $135 without tax. It was about $150 with tax. Let's say $150 with tax. These little stovepipe pieces were really cheap. Those are about $15 or $20. And I needed 3 pieces. So that was less than $100. However, I really wish I'd gotten the more expensive expandable one. So that's a thing. So you see, when we total all of this stuff up, this was not cheap. So even for a really simple, really minimal install where you do the work yourself, you're not paying for labor. Even with an inexpensive wood stove, in my case $700, you're still going to be out about at least twice the cost of that stove. So it's still going to be $1,500, $1,700, depending on your situation. It may be even more than that if you need an extra chimney extension or something like that, or you need a chimney support, which is another $80. I mean, there's so many things you can spend money on. But even for a modest stove like this, you're going to spend an additional $900 to $1,200 just getting the stuff for the install. And again, that's not labor. If you had to pay labor, you'd be out even more. So understand, this is not a cheap deal. Oh, and I didn't even include the cost of wood. You do have to buy wood to put in it. So whatever a cord of wood's going for where you are, that's what it cost. Mine was about $180, and it's about 3/4 of a cord of wood. It's not a full cord. But it has a lot of kindling and all that stuff, so whatever. But it's not cheap. It's not something that, oh, it's going to be cheap. The install is not cheap. Now, after you've installed it and it's good to go, well, now that's different, because then you're just buying wood or you're going out and chopping wood yourself. And so that can be less expensive. But there will always be an expense. So the idea you're going to get a wood stove and it's going to be cheap and then it's going to be cheap forever, not necessarily true. I got it because I enjoy it. I wanted a secondary heat source. I wanted a backup when I don't have electricity, at those times when I don't have electricity. And here again, having that backup heat keeps me from having burst pipes, keeps me from having a water heater freeze, keeps me from having all those horrible things happen that can happen when I don't have electricity. So it's kind of an insurance policy for me. It's backup heat for me, and that's why I did it. But it is not cheap. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comments what your experience has been with your wood stove. But I'm thrilled with mine. So I will see you next time.